Hello and welcome to our friends from around the world. I'm Daniel Warren, a neuroradiology fellow at Washington University, Mallinckrodt Institute of Radiology, and will serve as your moderator today. Welcome to this month's webinar, How a Leading Academic Medical Center Moved Their Imaging to the Cloud. Thank you to Sectra for sponsoring the 2023 SIIM webinar series. This webinar is eligible for 1 hour of SIIM Imaging Informatics Professional credits that can be used towards your American Board of Imaging Informatics Certified Imaging Informatics Professional certification or recertification. For questions, please contact info@siim.org. Please add your questions using the Q&A function in the Zoom menu throughout the webinar, and we'll work to answer those questions after the talk. It's my pleasure today to welcome Stacy Bernard, Director of Integrated Clinical Systems Enterprise Informatics at University of Rochester Medical Center. We also have Magnus Ronla, Head of Global Operations at Sectra with us today, who will be assisting with the question and answer portion of the presentation. And without more ado, Stacy, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. A quick intro and a little bit about myself before we get started. I grew up on the clinical side of the fence. I was trained in Buffalo, New York as a nuclear medicine technologist. After managing a nuclear medicine department and radiation therapy program, I was asked to be one of the super users of the hospital's first PAC systems, and I will let you draw your own conclusions on how that went. I did both of those jobs for about 5 years. I left direct patient care in 2014 when I joined the PACS team at URMC. That led me to my current role as Director of Integrated Clinical Systems. Today, I manage 5 talented teams who support more than 70 systems across the enterprise. These applications integrate with our EMR and span about 9 different service lines. URMC is an academic medical center that includes the Regions Trauma Center, a children's hospital, and 5 regional hospitals. We also have 13 urgent cares and 3 cancer centers. All of these locations produce just over 1 million studies per year, and we have 150 radiologists, residents, and fellows that read these studies. We have a deconstructed PAC system with separate vendors for the viewer, the archive, and the communication system. This system has been in place at URMC for over 10 years. 10 years ago, you were probably operating off an iPhone 5. Your PC was running Windows 8. We were all still obsessed with Candy Crush. And now most of us don't even keep a cell phone for more than 2 years. The internet speeds have increased from about 5 megabytes per second to 100 megabytes per second in that time span. So changes were coming whether we wanted them to or not. And we decided at this point we owed it to our patients, our physicians, to explore any possibilities for improvement. We quickly decided that our VNA and our communication system would remain separate and stay in place, and we would be looking to replace our viewer only. So we knew a few things as we set off on this journey. We knew this was a commitment. It would require input from many groups. We would not only need to look at our immediate needs, but we would need to consider what our future needs would be as well. Technology changes rapidly, so we can use this time to get us up to date and look at something that may be scalable as we grow. Perhaps the most exciting opportunity for the IT teams here was that this was an opportunity to erase some technical debt and to get back to a more manageable system. So many of you may know that when you have a system in place long enough, you make changes to fit your operational needs at any given point in time. And this leads to technical debt and degradation in your ability to support those systems. Or at the very least, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to support those systems. So we were in a position to do some spring cleaning and align with industry standards and best practices for today. We needed to identify our stakeholders. Who cares about this change and why do they care? Not all stakeholders experience PACS the same way. Not all stakeholders will have the same concern. Everyone will be impacted differently, and we needed to engage with all of them to capture all of the various workflows. Again, as many of you might know, there's workflows that people get creative out there, and you may not know how people are using your systems until you really jump into a change like this. The radiologists and the imaging IT folks are like kids jumping in a mud puddle. Some are ready to jump in with both feet and see what happens, and others are a little bit more cautious and concerned with the mess that jumping in is going to cause. So not everyone is comfortable with change, and it's important to establish a PAC steering committee to generate excitement, conversation, and understanding that goes both ways. Most radiologists are indifferent to the infrastructure that you're setting the system up on. They just need it to work, and they need it to work efficiently. So how fast can you serve me those images, and how many windows do I have to open, and button clicks will it take for me to create my report? Imaging IT's concerns are the ability to support the system, troubleshoot it, configure the application per the radiologist's needs and requests. And then you have your folks in privacy and security and network security that just want to protect the organization, and sometimes protect the organization from ourselves. Since this is a conversation about how we chose to go from on-prem to cloud, I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about our overall selection process, which seems like it began years ago at this point. Our radiologist identified a couple of our radiology chair identified a couple of his radiologists to champion the selection process. So those radiologists, myself and one of my senior engineers, met a few times before RSNA, and then we went to RSNA on a recon mission, and we were armed with a list of, we must have this, these would be nice to have, and then a few key things that were important to us as an organization. Cloud was nowhere to be found on any of those lists. And I say that because we did not set out looking for a cloud solution. We just went out there with an open mind and wanted to see what was out there and what was going to be best to fit our needs. So we came back from that RSNA with 4 vendors to further evaluate with our full PAC steering committee. Our PAC steering committee was made up of radiologists from every subspecialty across all of our hospitals and across all of our regional affiliates and imaging centers. We eliminated 2 vendor solutions, and we were down to the last 2, both of whom recommended moving to the cloud. So it was clear at this point that we seriously needed to consider this and dive into the details of what that meant for us as an organization. So cloud is not new to us. We're part of an academic center, academic university, and they have a pretty large footprint in the cloud. So we have team members and colleagues that are very comfortable with this. We have some smaller clinical data in the cloud, but none as big as PACS. So this kicked off many hours of conversations with our colleagues in university IT, network security, privacy, and both vendors' technical teams. So software as a service is enticing in an environment where you're constantly being asked to do more with less. And although my imaging IT teams were not completely sold on giving up the keys to the kingdom, they did understand that the resource constraints that we face daily with requests to stand up and evaluate new technology is not going away anytime soon. So SaaS allows us to manage that risk rather than to own it completely. The imaging IT teams were comfortable with the visibility that they would still have to monitor the systems, and they were confident in the vendor expertise and support. Procurement timelines and upfront cost of hardware is minimal with cloud implementations. The upfront cost of the hardware to be able to replicate across 2 data centers was significantly more expensive. And the timeline for hardware procurement, especially in the COVID years with now we have supply chain issues, that was also not desirable and was going to present a challenge. The other nice thing about cloud implementation is the predictable operating costs, and that's very nice to have when you're pulling together budgets and roadmaps. Cloud hosting allows for spinning up storage and compute resources more efficiently to accommodate for growth and acquisition of studies that seem to continuously get larger. Not to mention when you're acquiring other imaging practices or affiliate hospitals that come with terabytes of DICOM data to migrate. And so those were all very positive things, and we recognize those as pros for going to the cloud, and they certainly fit our needs and provided some solutions to our needs. But what about all the cons? What about the security and the connectivity and the limited control? So as we started to dive into some of these conversations, we were actually surprised by what we found. We were expecting that the biggest issue was going to be security, and that our security teams were going to have the most questions. And they did have some questions, but not nearly as many as we had anticipated. And I think our university experience with cloud helped us in this space. Not everybody is an academic medical center, so some smaller affiliates may struggle with that a little bit more. The biggest concern that our teams had was around our border infrastructure and pathways to move that large amount of data to our borders. So could we create a redundant pathway to the border that would accommodate the size and volume of data and we send and receive every day, and do it at the speed that our radiologists expect? So limited control, that imaging IT teams would not be able to directly resolve system issues that may arise in the cloud. So there was an understanding that they would need to rely on the vendor expertise in order to do that. So while Cloud Paks offers many benefits, there are also some challenges to consider, such as internet connectivity, data security, and compliance with regulations. So how do we prevent the storm or minimize the damage when something happens? So to protect us from planned and unplanned downtimes, we made a decision to put a downtime system in our own on-prem data center. We decided that downtime system would have the most recent 4 weeks of data at all times. And 4 weeks of data will suffice in almost any emergent situation. And in the off chance that a downtime lingers or studies older than 4 weeks are absolutely needed, they can always be queried from our on-prem VNA. So data loss. Data loss is a scary scenario for confidentiality and the cost of a breach. But as far as actual data loss and needing to recover that data, we were not too concerned because, as I mentioned, we're deconstructed and we have all of our studies in our VNA replicated across 2 different data centers. The loss of connectivity, this was arguably the most important piece to our clinicians and to our enterprise operations, and our network teams had a lot of questions surrounding this. So what we ended up doing is building a dedicated express route to the cloud and then creating a secondary connection with no overlaps at any point in those paths, which considerably minimizes our risk. We did put an IPsec tunnel around our express route to the cloud as well. And we're not live yet. Our go live date is scheduled for July 31st. And we're in the process right now of testing speeds with and without the IPsec tunnels and any bandwidth or bottlenecks that we might have in either one of those pathways. It's important to choose a vendor with experience that complements your needs. Somebody who sees what your needs are, has some expertise in that area, and maybe can fill in any gaps that your team's expertise doesn't cover. So at it's important to have somebody who knows the cloud technology and is also very good with customer service. So the next step was convincing others. So moving through our governance process to actually get that final approval and sign off. As mentioned earlier, our customers experience PACS differently, and therefore they view these changes from various lenses. And that applies to the advisory councils as well. We need to be prepared with information relevant to each council. So the first council that was up is our clinical advisory council, made up of executive leadership. They care about, do we need this system? How much is this system going to cost us? What's the ROI on the system? And does it fit into our strategic plans? So the necessity piece was easy. We needed to do something. Our current solution is working on an old technology. The vendor's changing platforms. So even if we stayed with the same vendor, we still had to change something. So that piece was an easy check mark. So then we went into the financials. So how much is this going to cost? What's the return on investment? We made a pretty big pitch that we needed to update our technology, regardless of who we went with and what kind of implementation we had, to upgrade that technology was going to cost us some money, and that there was no other option to get around this. Now, when we did our cost analysis between what it would cost us to get all of the equipment replicated across 2 data centers versus what it would cost us to spin it up in the cloud, that kind of helped us push ourselves toward the cloud a little bit in that area. Fitting our strategic plan, we chose a vendor that would grow with us. We can build out solutions for other ologies and for research, both of which fit into our enterprise roadmap. And the cloud scalability was also a bonus in this area. So we passed through the Clinical Advisory Council and then went to the Physician Advisory Council. So the Physician Advisory Council made up of physician leadership. Again, they're kind of like the radiologists. They don't really care what the infrastructure is and where you put this. They just need it to meet their clinical needs. They also need it to integrate with their third-party systems, including our EMR. Not much will really change from their workflow as long as you can check those, push those buttons. So they understood the need for the upgrade, and so we easily addressed their concerns. Now, not everybody likes change, but they did understand that we had to make a change was going to be made no matter how we did it. So we got past the Physician Advisory Council. Both CAC and PAC would defer to our Technical Advisory Council on any infrastructure decisions, specifically cloud. So the Technical Advisory Council was where we were going to encounter all of the hard questions. So we did our homework before walking into this meeting. We met with privacy and security as well as network security. I already mentioned how we talked to our friends over in University IT. And we had decided that these sorry about that. So when we went to that group, we met with privacy and security, and our Technical Advisory Council was comfortable that we had presented our solution. We did our homework. We answered all of their questions, and we presented a high level concept design. So in our high level concept design, we answered all of the questions. We brought in any of our technical counterparts that were going to be able to answer those detailed technical questions. And at the end, the Technical Advisory Council also saw the need for the upgrade and the change. And our pre-planning conversations were robust enough that TAC was confident that we had the right URMC staff involved to make a successful transition to the cloud. So you need to involve as many groups as you can to make this decision. Cloud PACS offers a more advanced and flexible solution for medical imaging than traditional PACS systems, and you need the village to believe this. Do your homework. There are many benefits, including cost effectiveness, scalability, accessibility, security, collaboration, but not all of them may apply to you and your organization. Focus on the advantages that apply to your organization. It's important to partner with the vendor who sees your needs and has experience in healthcare IT with a strong track record in data security and compliance. Medical facilities should carefully consider their needs and requirements before implementing a cloud system. So where do we go next? What's on the other side of this? We've already started engaging with our research partners to integrate a research database with our clinical PACS viewer. For some of you who have tried to do this, this is tricky because you don't want your research data intermingled with your clinical data. So we would separate them out as in a database, but as many of you know, your clinical radiologists sometimes need to review research studies to look for, any unknown findings, and just to make sure that there's not something that you don't have to report to a physician or the patient immediately that they need to look into further. So we've already started those conversations. We haven't implemented anything yet, but this will be right on the heels of our implementation. We've already begun some conversations with our orthopedics groups to consolidate our templating tools. Once PACS is stabilized, we're going to begin analyzing our breast imaging workflows and data flows to streamline and consolidate applications in that space. Those all contribute to some of our return on investment as well. Probably will not be reducing staff by moving to the cloud, even though we are giving up some of that support. But as I mentioned earlier, you're constantly being asked to do more without any additional FTEs. So we won't reduce staff, but the roles that the staff will have will certainly change especially when it comes to just the viewer support. So we'll concentrate on creating dashboards and data-driven reports to determine productivity of radiologists, turnaround time for different classes of exams, system efficiency, and success to us will mean that we'll have time to actually review, track, analyze, and make improvements to those workflows proactively instead of reactively. So what do you need today? That's one of the important things that you need to ask yourself. What do you need today? What are your future goals? And what will excite your stakeholders? So what do you need today? At minimum, you have to maintain parity to your current system. And what are your future goals? How do you remain relevant in the next 10 years from now? So you have to look at the industry trends and see which systems are, and you have to do a little guesswork, right? You have to kind of look in the magic ball a little bit and say, okay, what do we want to do in 10 years? Where do we want to be? And what do we think is going to happen in the industry? And how can we best set ourselves up for success in that space? And then when you're selling it to people, what's going to excite the stakeholders? Change very rarely excites physicians. Like they don't want you to move the cheese. They don't want to have to relearn all the muscle memory that they have. But what they do want is something that's more efficient, has maybe more tools that they need. The interoperability might be smoother and they might gain some efficiencies in that space. So keeping the data secure and accessible is terrifying in today's environment. So consider a hybrid approach like we did. As you refresh aging devices, maybe then you consider, does it make sense to move this device that's old to the cloud, similar to what we're doing right now? Most healthcare organizations won't be able to do an entire refresh, and maybe a hybrid approach will work best. But when you're doing a hybrid approach, you need to make sure that you can accommodate your new systems and your legacy systems at the same time. In most cases, cloud-based PACS lower cost, give easier access to radiologists working on-prem and remotely, and offer more security and efficient scalability. But change is hard for most people, so you have to create buy-in. And the best way to do this is by generating excitement. Do your homework, find what will appeal to each group, and draw in a wide range of stakeholders to build early ownership, consensus, and support. You want as many people in your corner as possible, because there's always going to be some pushback. There's always going to be some people going, no, I don't want to do this. But the more people you have that are excited about it, the easier the transition will be for you. And that's what I have. That was pretty quick. Maybe I spoke fast, but maybe it'll spark some good discussion and questions.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. That was wonderful. We're now going to move on to the question and answer portion of the webinar. During this webinar, you can continue to ask questions with the question and answer icon found at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. We're going to start off with a question, or actually two questions, from Michael Lafferty at University of Maryland Medical Center. The first question he has is, how did University of Rochester Medical Center address the on-premise application integration with the cloud-based PACS solution? A lot of the larger institutions will have multiple specialty viewers for both clinical and research purposes. What was the method for getting the images from those sources into the cloud-based?
So, this can vary depending on what systems you have, right? So we have an on-prem VNA, and our VNA has a routing tier, and we're keeping that in place. So we do have a couple specialty viewers, one that we use for maternal fetal medicine, one that we use for our echocardiology department, but we also send those images to our VNA. So our referring providers today, with our on-prem PACS, will look at the referring providers will see those images in our PACS via an image link in our EMR. And the cardiologists and the maternal medicine providers will actually read and dictate those studies and create their reports in that specialty viewer. Tomorrow, when we're in the cloud, that will remain the same for us. So they'll still use those specialty viewers to create reports, and those reports will go to our EMR, but the images will also be sent to our new viewer, and the referring providers will be able to click an image link in our EMR and be able to view those images there as well. Our radiologist, if you're talking about the radiologists themselves actually seeing images, any of the third-party post-processing tools that they have, we have integrated into our PAC system. So there's an API for most of them that will link them out to see without having to leave the viewer. I mean, they will have to leave the viewer, but the link to get to them will be right there, and they won't have to open up a new window, log into a different system.
I can generalize a little bit as well, since the networks in the cloud and the on-prem environment is paired. So the integrations looks very similar actually to what they do today on-prem as well. So you will really face the same kind of logic with integrations as you already have today when you have most of the things on-prem.
I think you already touched on the second question a little bit during your presentation, but was the vendor-neutral archive moved to a cloud-based solution, or is the separate long-term archive no longer relevant in cloud-based solution? You kind of had a hybrid, is that correct?
Yeah, we have a hybrid, and our VNA is separate and replicated across both of our data centers. We will have a mini VNA in the cloud also that will cache studies, but our long-term archive remains on-prem.
And then coming in from the Steve Reiger, we have is pathology in the scope of this as well at Rochester?
So it is not in the scope today, but we are engaging. I probably should have put that in my future slide, because we are engaging in conversations about pathology as well. So we've been working on with whole slide imaging now for a couple of years, and we have a small mini solution that is very vendor specific, and we're looking for something that will be a little bit more robust, and that is definitely on the roadmap.
And then how has your team's workload changed, or how do you anticipate it changing? Do you think that this will lead to less work, and will that end up having a larger focus on kind of organizational initiatives rather than day-to-day kind of operations? And also the third question in this multi-part question is, do you expect to hire less in the future?
I love this question, because like literally daily we have requests for new technology. I'm sure everybody's living this, right? And every time something comes up, we're like, okay, but where are we getting the people to do this? Where are we getting the people to support this? And it's just a big fight. Like nobody has any money and everybody wants everything. So we are definitely not going to decrease staff. We're going to hold on with all of our might to everybody that we have. And as far as PACS goes and PAC support goes, we will have much less to do there in that space. We won't just be totally hands off. We will be looking proactively to take care of things. We will be looking at trends. There are dashboards that allow us some visibility into how well the system is working, and we can identify trends, hopefully before there's a problem, and take care of them before we start getting calls to our help desk. In addition to that, we will be able to help out strategically with more system applications that are coming in the door.
We have another one. How are you separating the capital versus the operational cost buckets for the cloud solution?
So, I mean, capital is capital. So if anything that we had to put up front, that's a one-time cost that goes into our capital bucket and budget. And anything that is support and ongoing, we put into operating and put into our multiple year plan. As far as operational costs changing based on volumes, that's something that you resolve in your contract and have like a true up period. So we anticipate that we have X number of studies in our system today. We're going to see 3% volume next year. So the next year, our operating cost is going to go up by that much. So that's just all addressed in our contract. I'm not sure if that answers that question or not.
If that was your question and that was not quite what you're going for, give us please type in the chat. But our next question is from Nick Sharp Carbonell. Do you have large data set, kind of fast turnaround workflows active in the cloud? For example, like a large trauma CT exam with a pan scan. If you have breast imaging diagnostic tomogram that needs radiologist review while they're in the room, what is kind of the lag time between image acquisition and being able to interpret?
So we're not live yet, so I don't have any hard data on that. But in our routing tier, we have specific routes set up for emergent type studies that have an SLA defined. So if we have a stroke case, then that goes through a prioritized route, and that route would bring it to the cloud viewer and to the radiologist quickly.
I can add to that as well, and I think it's a valid question, and I think it's important to validate the workflows that you have. That needs to be fast and rapid. With the connectivity to the cloud, I mean that's the distance to the cloud will have some effect, but we always need to have a dedicated pipeline to the cloud to ensure that we support the majority of workflows, even emergency workflows in many cases. So technology has our back in the most cases there.
In terms of migrating the priors to the cloud, how long has that taken you to get your priors off of your long-term archive and VNA to the cloud?
So migrations are difficult too, right? They vary. We have done so many migrations at URMC from affiliate healthcare centers and third-party PACs that we've acquired and had to pull into our VNA. And the most difficult piece of that is the validation of the data and the cleanliness of the data. So this is all coming from our VNA. So it's already been, I'm going to call it pre-cleansed. So we did have to do some back and forth with our extracts to make sure that the cloud and our VNA were speaking the same language. And we probably went back and forth a few times. And then once we finally decided we were all on the same page, we started to migrate data. And we're not 100% migrated yet, but it's actually moving pretty quickly. So we're not moving all of our data to the cloud. We're doing the last 5 years. And I want to say we're almost done with that. And maybe it's taken a couple weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. And that was, like I said, after we had our extracts ironed out and everyone was on the same page.
We did something similar when we converted to Sectra. Do you plan on, we started off with maybe 5 years or something like that, and then eventually we added on more distant priors. Are you planning to do something like that, or do you think, are you going to stick with 5 years? Or?
We are not planning on doing that because over time, the 5 years is going to grow, right? So 5 years will become 6 years next year and 7 years the year after. And if we need something older than that, like I said, they can just pull right from our VNA.
Excellent. We have a question from David Brown. How are you validating, what's your plan to validate the network performance for, say, radiologists working at home or working from the clinic?
Well, first they'll tell us immediately if there's an issue. But during our testing phase and pre-go live, we have various team members that are working remotely today and that work on-prem, and all of our test scripts are being redundantly tested in all of those environments.
And I can add the vendor perspective as well, because it's important to us as well, of course, to be sure of the network performance. So we have built-in tools in the solution to determine just that, to be able to pinpoint the bottlenecks as soon as possible, because the network from the cloud system to the end user, it will involve Sectra end and the customer end, Rochester end, and we need to partner up and understand what the bottlenecks are if any problems would appear. So it's important that we have a great collaboration and like Stacy pointed out, a partnership when determining issues like this.
And we will have those fleshed out before we go live. Like, so I mentioned kind of tongue in cheek that the radiologist will let us know. They absolutely will. And we do have a handful of radiologists on our project team that are there for testing that out. And they're not our quiet radiologists. They're our radiologists that understand technology and are really working hard in this project and making sure that everything is working according to their clinical needs, which helps us because then our IT teams are not worried about the clinical needs. They're worried about the IT and the infrastructure, and the radiologists are weighing in on the radiologist needs. But the IT teams do have workstations set up in their homes and on-prem, and we will have those things absolutely ironed out before we go live.
And Stacy, you also commented earlier in your presentation that you will have transparency into the system as well. So these tools that I'm talking about, you will be able to see a red computer somewhere that doesn't give the performance that we expect for us both to help troubleshooting.
And those tools that you mentioned, Magnus, are exactly what our imaging IT teams are looking forward to.
What kind of knowledge base do you think would be helpful for people to have before migrating to the cloud? This is a question from Maria Lopez.
So there's a lot of information out there. And there's a lot of vendors that offer cloud solutions. Some only offer cloud solutions. Some will do an on-prem implementation or a cloud implementation. But I think the important place to start is when you're looking for your PACS system or your replacement is to know what your needs are. And does the cloud, like, don't go to cloud just to go to cloud, but does cloud do something to help any of your current issues? The scalability is a big one for us. So the fact that we could get hardware and we can spin up and spin down hardware much more efficiently than we can in-house is a big deal. But there's information. I encourage you to do Q&As and webinars like this one, because you're out there talking to your colleagues and maybe get different opinions. But when you go to an RSNA, visit each of those vendors and ask like very specific questions. Come with a list of what issues do you face today and can cloud help this? In some cases, it might not be. And the appetite for cloud adoption may change drastically depending on your organization and size of your organization. So I say that like some of our smaller regional hospitals, like we're large and we have teams that are dedicated to network. We have a team that is network and we have a team that is network security. Not everybody's going to have that. So, and I came from a small community hospital. In my small community hospital, the same person that was setting up servers was also setting up networks and fixing desktops. So that person might not have the knowledge and or bandwidth to really dive into something like this.
Can you kind of expand on what types of offerings did this cloud solution have that excited the stakeholders? This is a question from David Broussard.
So our radiologists, the stakeholders outside of radiology really are not going to experience much change. So there wasn't really a whole lot to sell to them. The two areas outside of radiology that interact with the PACS system more than just viewing images would be our ED staff and probably our orthopedic staff. So the tools that the new PACS has for ortho is tremendously different. So that was one area that group was excited about. For radiology, today we have a lot of technical debt. And so whenever we have a downtime or an upgrade, it's painful. It's painful for the radiologist. It's painful for the IT staff. So to excite them, we did show them the new and improved functionality and efficiencies, but the fact that their downtimes are going to be quicker, the fact that their ability to read remotely was going to become more efficient, and the fact that they would have say in how things were built, because maybe they weren't here 10 years ago when this was built, and now we have a whole new young group of radiologists that are pretty IT savvy and want to be involved, but maybe we couldn't change some of the things that they want to change in our current system. So those are the types of things that we use to get those folks excited.
What do you expect? This is just a question for me. What do you expect the difference in downtimes to be between the on-site and the cloud service?
The actual, like a planned downtime, I don't expect there to be as many planned downtimes, and I certainly don't expect there to be as many unplanned downtimes. So today we spend a lot of time babysitting our system to prevent a downtime. So things back up in our procs and in our storage pools, and a study is stuck, and we just are spending all day just watching the system, making sure nothing gets stuck. I don't anticipate us doing that on newer technology.
Sector 1 Cloud comes with a 99.99% uptime.
Excellent.
So that is what you should expect.
Yep.
One of the additional questions was, why did you choose to do the VNA on premises and not on the cloud as well, like a separate?
So our system is deconstructed, and so we already had we have the VNA in place, and we already have it replicated. Moving a VNA is more difficult than just moving a viewer. And I say just a viewer, but I mean, it's more than a viewer, but the VNA is where all of your data lives. So migrating that to the cloud was going to be a much bigger lift than just migrating. And when I say migrating, we're actually just duplicating. So now we really have 3 copies of our most recent 5 years. But moving that data from an on-prem data center to a public data center, there's really no reason for us to do that. It works with it on-prem. It's already on-prem. There was no advantage to just moving it to the cloud. That being said, if we had a similar situation with our VNA that we did with our viewer, where our vendor for our VNA was going to switch platforms and we had to make a change no matter what, at that point, we may choose. Like if we have to make this change, it may fit our needs to go to the cloud. It might not, but at that point, we would investigate that and make a decision as to whether or not we should stay on-prem or move to the cloud.
There are quite a few questions left in the Q&A box. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll try and get to as many as we can. Any that we don't get to, we'll be sending out an email with the responses to those questions. So just kind of letting you know, we won't forget about you. How does, from Michael Lafferty, for priority workflows, is there a tiered pipeline approach to account for the environment where a large percentage of exams might be stat?
Oh, stat exams. So yeah, so if we have exams, like I said, that have specific SLAs, then they would go through a prioritized route. But we also have in our work list where the radiologists are reading, a prioritized exam is going to float to the top of their work list, and they're going to see that pretty quickly. And if it doesn't get read and it starts reaching the end of its SLA, it'll be spread out to more radiologists as well. But there are workflows to make sure that those get read in a timely manner.
We had a question come in from Tan Bui. How large is your broadband connection? What kind of a connection did this require?
So we have a express route, and I want to say it's a 10 gig route, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think it is in this case. And we always recommend express routes, which is the Microsoft Azure dedicated connection to the cloud. And it's redundant in itself, but we always like to complement that with an over the internet connectivity solution as well, which we add an IPsec tunnel on top of. So we have always redundancy in multiple ways to connect to the cloud. Many facilities already have express routes, so that's why the question might be a bit difficult to answer sometimes, because you can use those express routes for different things, including the imaging pieces.
So thanks for jumping in on that, Magnus, because I was not confident that that's what it was 10 gig. But to complement what he just said, we did already have an express route to Azure because of some of our stuff on the university side. We chose to spin up an additional express route dedicated for imaging. My network teams, this is not my area of expertise, but my network teams feel like that's not really necessary, that they think that it's going to be just fine for all of imaging. But because it was our first major clinical system in the cloud, and there is so much data going back and forth, we didn't want to take that chance. So the express route is specific to imaging data. And after we're live and we see kind of what's going through that, then maybe the next clinical system that goes to the cloud might be able to share that express route, but we'll at least have enough data knowing that if there's room in that pipe or not. We weren't gonna go out of the gate and not give ourselves some breathing room.
Probably just time for one more question before we wrap up. Is there going to be a challenge in kind of third-party post-processing with the cloud service, or how will that kind of integrate in the system?
So that's integrated similarly to the third-party viewers. So we have APIs for most of our third-party post-processing vendors and systems, and the radiologists can get to them right from PACS. There'll be like a button at the top of their bar that they can click and say, hey, I want to go to this one or this one. And then our technologists, when they're post-processing something, they're going to send it up to PACS using our routing tier.
I think it's very valid questions around integrations with different solutions. And I think that cloud or not cloud, I think that we are going to see the new normal now with some systems being in a cloud somewhere and some systems are on-prem. So integrations between them will be a commodity and will work pretty much the same way as they all were located in the same facility.
Okay, we'll have to wrap up our question and answer component of the presentation. I really appreciate both of you answering all those questions so expertly. Just a reminder, members have to attend a minimum of 45 minutes to get their continuing education. And if you have any questions about this, please refer to the info@siim.org. We really hope you enjoyed the presentation today. If you like this topic or you'd like to see something else that's enterprise imaging related, we want your feedback. The session survey will come out tomorrow in a post-webinar email. It'll include the recording and the slides, and registered non-SIIM members will have 7 days complimentary access to the resources on SIIMU. Check your email tomorrow for details. We'll see you at SIIM 2023 annual meeting, June 14th to the 16th in Austin, Texas. It's your go-to destination for imaging informaticists to discover the latest enterprise imaging technologies and solutions. It's where vendors and users come together to innovate. Don't miss your chance to spend 3 days with this amazing community. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. It was nice to have you, and I really would like to thank Sectra for sponsoring this presentation. Without them, it wouldn't be possible.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.